you've been curious about accessing abilities such as astral travel, remote viewing, akashic records, and telepathy, then you're in the right place. Today, cosmic intuitive channeler Elizabeth April shares with us information she has accessed from beyond the veil. We talk about sex and orgasm as powerful spiritual tools to awakening, the shift from a chakra system to a crystalline frequency, the importance of releasing resistance, children and parenting, and so much more. Hi, everybody. Welcome to our episode with Elizabeth April as we continue on with science, mysticism, and beyond, humanity's next phase of evolution. If you're not familiar with Elizabeth April, this is going to be a really fun episode. My wife, Tay, and I came across Elizabeth's work probably mid-2020, and we really liked it. And I mean, initially, it was a little bit for me to wrap my head around because Elizabeth gets into all sorts of stuff. I mean, Elizabeth April, she channels and she does remote viewing and she visits akashic records and all of these sort of skills that we would often actually attribute to like these very spiritually awakened yogis and some of these mystics, right? And Elizabeth also gets into other entities and aliens and I mean, all sorts of stuff. And so initially it was a little bit more out there for me when I first came across her work, but there was something about the way that she explained everything. And when I allowed myself to just listen to the message and listen to how the different things that she talked about resonated with me, so much of what she talked about just sat so well. I mean, she's only 28, but you can tell that she's got so much depth to her and so much wisdom and knowledge that she's able to share in, I think, a very succinct and direct way, which I really appreciate about the way that she does things. In this episode, we get to talk about so many cool things. So one of the areas we talk about is looking at the role of sex and orgasm in spiritual awakening. And this is something that I've been really interested in the last while. When I started to read more about the work from Alexander Lowen and bioenergetics, and then that goes back to Wilhelm Reich, who was a physician who basically looked a lot at the power of sex and orgasm. It's been turned into something that is really just this physical, sexual act. And there's actually so much more to it. And it can actually be a huge pathway to evolving spiritually. So we have a really interesting chat about that. We also talk about things like astral travel and remote viewing and telepathy and some of these different abilities. She talks about that. She talks about information that she's gathered from accessing those states of awarenesses. We talk about things like soul contracts and life lessons, which can add some perspective to when we're going through especially more challenging times, and another way to look at some of those things. We get into the meaning of the word pure or purity. This is a word that comes up a lot when we think of spirituality or when we think of children, and thinking that it's often tied to like good and clean and all these things. And she gives a really interesting perspective around that, which is very much in line with how Tay and I have been thinking about the last while as well. And we also get into lots of information around parenting and children. So really fun episode. Elizabeth just talks about things in such a great way. We really enjoyed our conversation with her. And before we get into the episode, I also want to say thank you to EMF Harmonized for sponsoring the series. And most people, when they think about EMF mitigating technology that blocks the EMF that comes off of our devices, so our cell phones, our routers, our computers, basically all of those devices should have a solid EMF mitigating technology like EMF Harmonized has. Now, the other thing though that they have, which is also very interesting, is they have the body discs. And the body discs have been shown to mitigate inflammation. So you can actually use them for pain. So I've actually been using them on different areas that I've had injuries in. So if I was working out and I hurt my shoulder a while back, I've got some pads up on my shoulder. I'd bang my foot dancing with my 4-year-old the other day, and right on the inside of my big toe, kind of down around this area here on my big toe. And so I plopped one of the discs on that, and it's really amazing. And you can go on their website at emfharmonized.com. The best way to get there is just go to my website, click on EMF Harmonized, get 10% off powerful EMF and 5G protection. That'll take you right to their website. And when you click the link to sign out go to proceed to checkout. And once you go to proceed to checkout, you are going to see the discount code Dr. Loken, DRLOKEN, that will already give you the percentage off, the 10% off your order. If you don't see that, just plug it in up top here, discount code, just put in DRLOKEN, Dr. Loken, and you'll automatically get 10% off your purchase. We use them on all of our devices. I use them for any time there's aches or pains. They're a really great technology. On their website, you can watch videos that will show how they affect clumping of red blood cells. You'll also see how it mitigates inflammation. So check them out. All right, everybody, stay tuned and be prepared to have your mind blown by Elizabeth April.
Welcome to the Inspire Health Podcast. Your life is about to get a whole lot better. Have you ever felt like you tried everything and yet still couldn't find the answers or the solutions that you were seeking? Whether you're dealing with chronic illness, physical or emotional pain, I want you to know that your body is the most sophisticated machine on planet Earth. Your body holds unfathomable wisdom. Trust in it and learn from it. Know that there are answers and there are solutions to your specific health challenges. And we will be uncovering all of them here on the Inspire Health Podcast. I'm so excited to be a part of your healing journey. Your transformation starts now.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the Inspire Health Podcast. And as we continue on with our series on science, mysticism, and beyond, humanity's next phase of evolution, today's guest is Elizabeth April. Elizabeth is a cosmic intuitive channeler who has the ability to go into other realms and dimensions in order to gain access to information through vibration and visuals. By having the ability to explore past lives, Elizabeth works with individuals who want to comprehend their past, present, and future. Elizabeth is most excited exploring the topics of spiritual awakening, cosmic disclosure, the Galactic Federation of Light, and quantum physics. Whether you're sitting in her audience, watching her YouTube channel, or participating in a session, the insights channeled through her will leave you feeling in tune with the limitless possibilities existing in the universe. Elizabeth, such a pleasure to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It's very exciting to be here and get into all of the nitty gritty of what's going on at this time on the planet, in the universe, with energy. It's a wild ride that we're all on.
It's definitely been a wild ride. And I mean, that's the whole purpose of even putting this series together and talking to many different people to get different perspectives. And we came across your work kind of in the middle of 2020, I think. And I just found I think a lot of people were looking for more information outside of what they were just classically seeing on the mainstream media. And yours, along with a bunch of other work, was in some ways stuff that we had heard of in different ways, but never really dived so much into it. And what I love about a lot of the messages is, and I've implored this to different people too, even when it comes from a place that you're not familiar with or that feels even uncomfortable, it's like, try and step away from where it's coming from and just listen to the message and see how much the message resonates. Because regardless of what people's beliefs are around certain things, it's just try and just let certain messages come in and see where they fit for you, right? And see if they open up somewhere that makes sense for you. And so as we went through this journey, yours was one of the ones where a lot of times we listened to what you were talking about. And I said, so much of what she talks about just feels really bang on. It resonates really well in different ways. And so we wanted to share that with other people as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's amazing. I feel like for me, I have this kind of urge within myself because I have such a curious and also critical mind. I kind of want to put all of the pieces together, right? So I'm not just about aliens. I'm not just about quantum physics and science, and I'm not just about spirituality. It's like, how do these three huge pillars within exploring, the mind and psychology and the universe really fit together? So it's kind of been my journey and my mission to put all of those pieces together into something that is cohesive, understandable, and hits home for most people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you do a really nice job with pulling it together. And I think that's kind of what resonated with me too, is, my main area for sort of career-wise is integrative medicine. So it's looking at, and when you start to really dive into that, you go well beyond just the physical part of the body. You have to look at everything, mind, body, spirit, and beyond. And so part of that, and you just see it. And once you start to see it and you have experiences with it, there's just more stuff. So then you become really curious to just want to understand and stay open to lots of different pieces of the galactic puzzle as we speak.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
for people, Elizabeth, that aren't too familiar with your work at all, can you give us a little bit of a background as far as when did you start to become aware of some of these abilities? How does it work for you? That sort of thing.
So I was born with something called extrasensory abilities. So it's basically, the senses that go beyond the senses that we have in our body. You could call it like the third eye, or that intuitive sense. Um, for me, there's many different ways of perceiving energies and vibrations. There's a lot of different clairs out there, but the ones that I really kind of hone in on are the clairvoyance, which is all about visuals. So every time, or not every time, but when I want to, when I close my physical eyes, I can open my third eye and I can basically see chakras and auras and ghosts and spirits, and then of course other beings in other dimensions as well. And I've actually had that ability since I was very, very young. My parents kind of knew around the age of 2 that I was seeing things and perceiving things beyond just what my brother was maybe picking up on. And he was about a year older than me. And yeah, and it was a journey, at 10, I shut down my abilities because I was kind of the weird kid, and it was hard making friends and fitting in and, being normal and doing the whole thing. And then, I kind of reawakened my abilities at the age of 16. And that was really through a very dark period of questioning and restlessness and anxiety and depression, and really, truly not wanting to be on this planet because this isn't what I signed up for, right? Like, I mean, everyone else in my high school was like, yeah, this is great. We get to have freedom and we get to have a 9-to-5 job and settle down and like have kids and make money and do the things. And that was my worst case scenario, if that's it, if I'm just here to live a normal life, like count me out, and through my questioning at the age of 16, I ended up stumbling upon, but obviously not because it was contracted. My dad, who's an engineer, actually ended up studying for a brief time past life regression. And so it's kind of like his party trick. And at 16, he's the one who said, hey, have you ever thought about this before? And would you be interested? And of course, I was, through the moon, absolutely interested. And in about an hour and a half, we went into about 5 different lifetimes at 16. And all of these lifetimes were, maybe I was a philosopher, maybe I was a healer, maybe I was a channeler or a shaman. But in each one of these lifetimes, I had the ability to gain access to information beyond this physical reality and present the information to humanity in a way that it helped them, right? And so at 16, I realized that that was my mission. I didn't know how I was going to get there. I didn't know even how to start, but I knew that that was my purpose on this planet. So I did actually begin with past life regression. Eventually, I realized that putting other people into a trance-like state was very inefficient and sometimes ineffective because they were unable to let go of their own mind to get into that trance state. So I decided, what if I just put myself into a trance-like state? What if I just tap into someone else's akashic records in past lifetimes? Is that possible? And I started to do that. And all of a sudden I'm astral traveling and remote viewing to other timelines and other past lives in my own akashic records and in other people's. And then I thought to myself, why be contained with someone else's past lifetimes or even my past lifetimes? Can I go and explore other, even famous lifetimes? Like, who was Jesus? What happened back then? And then finally, it wasn't until my actual first conscious abduction, also around the age of 18, where I started to realize, aliens do exist. And what does that mean for us? And why are they here at this time? And that's when I actually started having very vivid recall and flashback to past lifetimes where I was in other bodies on other planets in other dimensions. And I started to really understand who those beings were, what they were doing, and what those contracts were with planet Earth. So that's kind of like the short story of my journey so far. And I'm 28 now. So it's been 10 years of unfolding all of that and exploring all of that and asking those big questions.
So awesome that you had a dad that was dialed in on that and was able to kind of take you there at 16 to be able to work with that stuff. Because otherwise, I mean, that's a hard path to try and figure out completely on your own too. And to just have someone that supports and kind of hears you when you're talking about it too.
Yeah. And now I feel like you guys are, that support system with your open minds for your kids too, right? So
Yeah, for sure. Well, and I think that's a lot of people's minds are opening up in big ways over this last while.
yeah.
I think maybe just going back, you mentioned at 18 you were abducted. I didn't know that. Can you speak a little bit more about that, what that experience was like?
Yeah, so I went away to university. The first thing I wanted to do upon getting away from my hometown was I wanted to explore something called Vipassana, which is a silent meditation technique. And I had done this in many, many lifetimes, especially when I was in India in past lives. So I wanted to re-explore this. So I went away to a 10-day silent meditation retreat. And it was, of course, it was in the middle of nowhere, you can't talk. So what a great place to abduct someone when they can't actually speak to it, and actually it had all of the markers of a typical abduction, right? It was even 5 miles away from like a military base. So it was a hot spot. And of course that was contracted. It was, in my contracts to be abducted at that time, but it wasn't a pleasant abduction experience. And oddly enough, I remember everything. It's like it was burned into my memory. And I know that that was for a reason as well, so that I could unfold and unpack all of that. I was abducted on the second night by a species I call, anyway, the tall whites. And they were just that, super tall, maybe 7 or 8 feet tall, super pale white skin, almost like transparent skin. They were kind of gross. I don't know, that's just my human opinion. And so it was a very fast, very quick abduction. They took me up, pulled me from my bed, took me up on their ship. And there was kind of like a doctor, you could call it. And there was a machine, and this machine went into my right ear. And I believe that they actually put something like a tracking device in my right ear. Now, before that happened, like I said, I was astral traveling, remote viewing, lucid dreaming, telepathy, all of that. And I felt like I couldn't do any of that after I got home from the meditation retreat, because I felt like I was literally being followed. I felt like they were 10 feet behind me all the time. And then I went to this medical medium, you could call them. And right away she scanned my energy and she said, "Oh, you have a chip in your right ear." And I said, "Oh yeah, okay, cool. I've been dealing with that." And so she just energetically kind of psychically removed it. And honestly, after she did that, that feeling of them being around all the time went away. And she just said that the chip was actually made of biological material, and it would just basically kind of melt. And it sure did, because I had ear drainage issues for quite some time after that. But that was it, and so that, once again, that needed to happen, even though it was fear-based, to really open me up to the possibilities, and also to have compassion around other people who get abducted in a very fear-based way.
You spoke about being contracted. Can you speak a little bit more about that with our audience who are not familiar with what exactly that means?
Absolutely. So through my exploration, and I've also done a lot of mediumship work. So, I cross over spirits and passed away loved ones. And, sometimes, especially at the beginning, I used to go through the white light with them to see what's on the other side, what's going on here. So I kind of I've seen the incarnation process from start to finish, right? Death, rebirth, and again and again. And, through that exploration, what I realized is that there isn't a man in the sky who's dictating or creating our life and choosing what suffering or what pleasures we go through in incarnation after incarnation. It's truly us, right? As a soul without a body, we choose the life that we want to live. We choose the body that we want to be in. We choose the pitfalls and the downfalls and the heartaches and all of that we need to go through. So when I say I was contracted for that, I wrote my own contracts, or you could call it blueprints as well. I wrote my own blueprints for this lifetime to have certain experiences to allow me to learn lessons or complete my mission or purpose or what have you. And that's really empowering. Everyone gets caught up in the whole destiny versus free will debate. And I used to get caught up in that for years. And I would try and spite my own destiny until I realized that I wrote my own destiny. And then I'm like, I'm just spiting myself. myself. Like, what am I doing? And you write those contracts without attachments, without an ego, without limitations. And how beautiful is that, right? So I surrender to my contracts and my blueprint, knowing that I created them. I created my own destiny. And I still try and, interject my own free will every once in a while too.
Cool. So what would you say the purpose of life is? Because I've been wondering that since I was a kid.
Okay, cool. Yeah, this is a big one. What is the purpose? I mean, religion has been trying to, tackle this for a while. This was one of my very first questions when I started to channel and download information. What are we doing here? So I'll kind of briefly, I'll briefly sum it up. So I believe that within this universe anyway, because there's many universes, we have 12 dimensions. All a dimension is a vibrational density, right? So as we move up through the dimensions, the density of vibration gets less and less. Here we are in the third density, the third dimension frequency. So it's quite dense here. So in every dimension, as a soul, we have many different incarnations. And for each incarnation that we choose through each dimension, there is a set of lessons that we have to learn. Every dimension, based on its density, gives us a certain amount of limitation, right? So because we're here in the third dimension frequency, the concepts of space and time are very linear. They're very limited. And there's many lessons that we can learn within the confines of those limitations. So from my exploration, I believe that every dimension has a certain number of lessons to learn. Let's say 1,000 lessons per dimension. So then we can live 1,000 lifetimes or maybe 10,000 lifetimes per dimension. Once we learn all of those lessons in each dimension based on the limitations, we move on to another dimension. Now, I used to think that, okay, so you go from dimension 1, graduate, dimension 2, dimension 3, and it's not even that way. I'm perceiving this understanding of the universe in a linear way, when as a matter of fact, in my last lifetime, I could have been an 8th dimensional Palladian being, right? So the whole kind of purpose of being incarnated and separate from source to begin with is really just to go through different lessons and be faced with different challenges and different limitations and overcome them and move forward and move through all of the 12 dimensions. And then once you're there in this place of enlightenment, or whatever you want to call it, you actually go back as an ascended master and you help all of the other beings and all of the other souls and all of the other dimensions. And then you have a choice. Do you want to go back to source in this universe, or do you want to become your own source and create your own universe, right? So yeah, so it's really fascinating. That's kind of like a sum up of like, what is this all about? And that really just equates back to, okay, cool. So just be, right? The whole point of this is to be on the journey. So stop trying to get to the end destination, whatever that is in your mind.
So when we have major events like what's gone on sort of 2020 up and through where we currently are in lots of different areas around stuff, is there collective lessons that we are all supposed to be learning and figuring out, or is it still very individual or some sort of amalgamation of the two?
Yep, it's always both. So even if you had an incarnation as a tree and you were in a forest and one day that forest catches on fire, right? That's a collective lesson that all the trees in that area are learning, right? Whatever that lesson is, and then we all have our own individual lessons as well. So I believe that we create our individual reality through our conscious observation, and quantum physics and the double slit experiment will back me up on that. And then I also believe that together, collectively, we co-create the reality that we see around us, right? So that also equates to, we should never be in victim mentality, because it's not the government that's doing that to you. It's not even your family that's doing that to you. It's not even your genetics that are doing that to you. You chose that body to learn that lesson for a reason. You put yourself here on this planet at this time for a reason. It should be empowering. You're here to change the system, not just to be in it. And that's what we all need to know at this time, especially given the events that are going on.
So probably the importance then in that is to always be reflecting back and asking
yourself, what's going on? What am I feeling? What am I supposed to be learning? Is there a bigger picture? So that then we can arrive at some sort of...
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really profound. So when I first stepped into that, oh my goodness, like everything has a meaning. You know, I would drop a crystal or something on my foot and I'd be like, what's the meaning behind that? And believe it or not, I'd be thrown back to a past lifetime where my foot was chopped off because of this thing, you know, and it would just all be so cyclical, you know. And then now, honestly, in this past year, I've really surrendered to ignorance. And it's really funny because I'm like so about like hunting for knowledge. And recently it's like, you can't know everything. And I've had to surrender to that. And also, meaning is simultaneously meaningless because we denote our own meaning based on our own perception and limitations within that perception. And it's just a spiral that we can get into. So as much as everything in your reality derives meaning, everything in your reality is also simultaneously meaningless because here we are just in a projected reality of illusion, right? So I flip back and forth between meaning in everything and the meaninglessness of meaning itself, right? So it's just really fascinating, and it's, you know, it's just navigating those two concepts.
That's so interesting because you speak of that. So you speak of ignorance. We've signed up to that as well. This 2020 specifically, because we realized we came to the realization that we know so very little. Like everything, I feel like almost everything that we've been taught could very well be false. Yeah. And Sasha Stone spoke of that too during his episode. He said, you know, speak into, be okay with stepping into a state of insecurity. And what does that feel like? And I think that's really profound because oftentimes we do want to pin things down. We do want to understand things to the point that we can control them. Right. And so coming to a place where we can just give way to a state of, it's possible that I just don't know. It's possible that there's so much more to learn. There's so much more to understand, to find out, to get curious about. And I mean, kids are so great with that because they're constantly in this state of wonder and curiosity. And, you know, they play different roles and they try on different costumes, literally and figuratively. And, you know, and kids are not... Some people, I think, who haven't had kids yet, not yourself, but I've heard of this other speaker who spoke of this, you know, as if kids are just perfect and they're kind and they're generous. That's not the case at all. Like they actually, they're everything. They try out the bully, they try out the meanness, they try out the sweetness and the generosity. And I feel like it's through the playing with these different ways of being that they, within their own innate wisdom, figure out what sits well with them, or based on the feedback that they're getting from the external, what is working for them at that time. So it's, it's so interesting what you just said, because that's been a common one that's been coming up regularly.
Absolutely. And, you know, I would consider children as well as pets and animals and maybe plants, but we'll go animals and children. And I consider them pure, right? But pure doesn't mean like all light and all love and all butterflies and rainbows. Pure just means they're a reflection of everything all at once. And they can, you know, flip into those different vibrations instantly. Like my dog is the cutest, you know, most innocent, a little bit dumb, you know, lacking on the brain cells. But she can flip when she sees another dog. Like, it's like, you're tiny, like she's got like little man syndrome, but, you know, and so it's just very fascinating how these very pure beings are just a reflection of what's around them. And we're all moving from the chakra system, which I believe is kind of an old traditional system, which is mind blowing to a lot of Buddhists and you know, Eastern kind of people. And we're moving into crystalline frequency, right? We're moving into this state of being where it is everything all at once. We're not holding energy in our bodies anymore to process it. We don't need to process it. It's instant. You feel it, you release it, right? We've been taught to feel it and suppress it and hold it. And as you probably know, it creates dis-ease in the body, disease, right? And so it's wild how we have to get back to that inner child state. We have to get back to that state of purity, and we have to surrender to, when you're having a bad day, feel it, be in it, chill out and watch Netflix all day if that's what you want to do. Don't resist, because that resistance within the action that you're taking is creating more resistance, and it's creating more self-sabotage. It's creating more decisions that you don't want to make. So that resistance is almost more detrimental to the initial feeling and the emotion that you're having in the first place.
And that's a really important point, because I think a lot of times this is where like people create a lot of guilt and shame around behavior and stuff. And most of the time it's like, and this is what comes back to kids, is kids just really function in their natural state. They don't think beyond what just resonates with them, and they go with it. And that's why they can switch and let go of things like instantly, right? They can be completely upset about something and then it's gone. My daughter was saying this just to me the other day. There was something she did and I was still holding on to it for a little bit too long. She goes, "Daddy, that was back then. It's like we're here now." I just start laughing. I'm like, "You're right. Thank you, Guru."
And it's so funny because when they do pick up on something, or when they do feel something intensely, they have a temper tantrum. And, a lot of parents, I would really observe this before I became a parent. And we oftentimes, or I would see oftentimes, or I would do this oftentimes initially with my first child. I hope he forgives me. I would like reprimand him, like, get it together. Let's figure this out. Like, get over it. And it's like, and I know that was my conditioning with my parents. And, if I was saying too much or saying too little or speaking too loud or speaking too softly, I would get a pinch underneath the table from my mom, while we had guests over to like smarten up or do something different. And I think it's because of that conditioning that we kind of forgot how to best deal with our emotions as they arise, because they're truly there to help us navigate with life and help us to discern between what's working and what's not. And then we started to hold on to them and repress them and question it. And, there's the good and bad, the black and white. And our emotions eventually became so much more dramatic than they needed to be. Whereas, now I know that if I'm having a really challenging day, which we were both, yesterday was a weird kind of day. It was like one thing after another of challenging stuff coming up for the both of us. And thankfully we live with my parents. So we left the kids and we just walked over through the forest and sat down, and just surrounded by trees and birds chirping. We knew that works for us in order to calm our nervous system and clear the energy. So that's as far as learning how to deal with emotions. We can all work at it and become better at it. But I think kids because they come in their raw form, they're very close to the spirit world. We can learn a lot from them too, in case we've forgotten.
Absolutely. And I just want to bring it to like another level within this concept, because it's so important. So as starseeds, and I'll just briefly explain what a starseed is. So from my definition, a starseed is a soul that comes from a cosmic interdimensional place and chose to be here at this time. It's important to differentiate, say, like, quote unquote, a human soul versus a starseed soul, because we operate very differently. Typically starseed souls feel very lost, feel very, like this isn't their home. Why did I sign up for this? A lot of depression, a lot of mental health stuff. Now, for me, just when you were talking about your kids, so my partner, my wife, she's amazing, but she's also ADHD and on the spectrum for Asperger's. So she is like an inner child. Like she doesn't have, like for me, I'm so divine masculine in this way of like, but this is the way that you need to be. And it just kind of clicked in of course, like I'm a starseed soul, not saying that she's not, but it's like for starseeds, we have struggled lifetime after lifetime on this planet trying to fit in, trying not to make waves, because every time we've ever made waves, every time we've ever come out as a thought leader, we've been persecuted, we've been killed, we have been, at the stake, burned at the stake for being different. So it's like starseeds, especially, not just coming from the lineage of what is traditional and what is approved and what is accepted, but also like, who are we in this moment? And how can we be more human to just fit in and be normal? So when my wife is just like talking to strangers and she's just totally going above and beyond, like, what is acceptable or normal, and that's like her Asperger's coming out, it freaks me out. It's like, babe, like, we don't do that here, like on this planet, like this is not normal. But now I'm like, a lot more, I'm getting into her energy. I'm getting into that, like, let it go and be that divine, feminine and inner child, So yeah, it's really fascinating. But starseeds feel that too. It's like, but we have to fit in. We have to be normal for protection, right? And now I keep having to say in my videos, you're safe and it's okay to be you, and that's tough for a lot of us.
I wanted to mention something too that you had said before when you were talking about meaning. And I think this is such an important concept too, because I feel like we establish meaning based on the perspective that we're viewing the world through, right? So essentially, and almost think of this as like states of consciousness. So it's like, if we are in a very angry state, then we see an angry world and we view meaning out of it from that lens. And if we're in a fearful state, same things. And I often use the example, it's like how meaning changes in your world changes if you're in one place and then all of a sudden you fall head over heels in love, and all of a sudden you see the world in a very different lens. So again, it's like when we talk about meaning, and it's like, and why you're talking about meaning and the meaninglessness, it's like it can be completely meaningless, because meaning can change in an instant as soon as you shift into viewing your world and your surroundings from another lens. And that's why I think this openness and curiosity is such an important piece, because knowing that meaning changes and our beliefs can change in an instant when we view our world from a different perspective. So I just think that's an important thing to bring to people, so that they're kind of aware of that when we talk about meaning and meaningless. And it's like, not that the world's meaningless, but it's like it can change in an instant.
Yeah, I just want to mention one thing about that. So people may hear that and say, okay, so, life is crappy because, I'm here in this moment and I'm viewing it in that way. So people, maybe hearing that are like, okay, cool. Like, so I'm just perceiving it in this way because I'm in a low vibration. So my biggest tip is, how do we transmute yourself from a fear-based, from a low vibration into a higher vibration? So maybe you've lost your job, maybe you're single, maybe, you don't have a lot of money, or you're not in a great living situation. Maybe, like, seriously, physically, your life isn't great right now. What are the things, small little things, that we can appreciate? Maybe you walk outside and you live in a busy city, but you take a look at the sky and you're like, oh, wow, it's a beautiful day today, or you have a plant at home and you water it and you're like, wow, you're really blossoming. Or you have a crystal that you sit with and you're like, wow, you're just so beautiful. And, I noticed the new rainbow in the crystal for the first time. Like, in order to transmute ourselves from a low vibrational frequency into a higher vibration, it's not about what is your next goal and what is the end game and what don't you have. It's about, what do you have? What can you appreciate? That appreciation, that gratitude will flip everything else around. You've got all these heavy things that are lower. One small thing, like a plant or the sky or the sun on your face, is going to transmute everything else about your life in that moment. And then slowly but surely, as you shift your vibration into more appreciation and gratitude, your physical reality begins to shift after the vibration shifts first. And it takes time. The physical reality takes time. Your vibration, as we just talked about with kids, can flip in an instant.
And I think a really important piece around that too is that if some people are in a really low state, a really low level of consciousness, like say like guilt or shame or something like that, that really kind of pulls you down by the ankles, sometimes it might be hard to, even catch something that feels like it can be appreciative. But I think what's also helpful to remind yourself is that even moving from somewhere like that to maybe getting angry
angry is actually a higher state of consciousness that has more power and more volition. And that actually feels better inside your body than, say, guilt. And then maybe transitioning from there to maybe out of just anger or rage to maybe more frustration or disappointment, and kind of like moving yourself up naturally. That's sort of smaller incremental steps if you're having a hard time connecting to something that's a powerful field like gratitude right away. But I completely agree with you. I wrote a book called Letters That Move the World, Intentional Acts of Gratitude, because gratitude is such a powerful field of transformation. But if some people are really stuck low, you don't have to go way up right away. You can kind of baby step your way up, but listen to how it feels in your body. Most people feel better being angry than they do feeling guilt, right? Like it feels better in your body.
Absolutely.
One question I wanted to transition to was when you are astral traveling and when you're getting information or from the akashic records and all of these different areas where you can tune into, how do you discern what is truth versus what is not? How are you able to determine when the information is coming from a place that you know resonates as truth as opposed to what might be not true or falsehood? It's a question I'm asking everybody because I feel like at this time, it's such an important question. How do we discern those differences?
Absolutely. Yeah. So for me, within this entire universe, no matter what incarnation, there's information contained within the universe and the different layers of the dimensions and what have you. But above and beyond all of the different facets and the layers and the strings and the entanglement, there's really just two aspects of this universe. I guess three. We live in a polarized binary, world. So you've got light, which is just high vibration, and then you've got dark, which is low vibration. And then I guess the third aspect of this universe is just source itself. It's the combination of light and dark, right? It's just source. It's everything and nothingness, as we just mentioned. So for me, it took me a long time of deep diving and exploring both aspects of this reality, and I call it the binality, right? Binary reality. It took me a while to explore the darkest of the dark in this reality and the lightest of the light in this reality to fully be able to discern. I believe that us as human beings, as already limited individuals, it's very difficult for us to figure out and discern between both of those things because there's so much twisting and manipulation and falsehood and projection that's going on here. You will never be able to understand the entirety of this reality if you're only sitting in light, ever. It's all good. It's all beautiful. My life is amazing. Everything's provided for. Okay. You will never understand the full picture. Likewise, you will never understand the full picture if you are stuck in that low vibrational frequency, in that darkness, in that fear. I have gone to the bottom of the barrel in this reality. I have gone to the highest heights in this reality. And that allows me the ability to discern through vibration. So it's all how it sits in me, right? And just like you were mentioning at the beginning, you don't know why my information resonates or the information coming through me resonates, but it just does, right? And it's something that we have to remove our analytical, logical mind from and get into that soul space, get into that vibrational resonance. And it took me a while in understanding both the light and the dark simultaneously to come to this place where I can just easily remove myself from this polarized reality and just be above it all. Not in a hierarchy way, just above it, above the polarity. And then I swoop down and then I still play with 3D. I still play with 5D. I still play with anger and frustration. I still play with challenge, but I also still play with gratitude and, being blissed out, And so, so for me, it's just understanding both sides of the coin. And for others, I understand that it's for them also exploring both sides of the coin. And that's where, some people don't fully understand my content because they've only ever experienced just the dark or just the light. And they don't really understand that middle ground. But I always try and put myself back into this place of being the objective observer, being, in that 0 point neutrality, just like you guys taking a walk in the woods. That's you guys recognizing, hey, we are way too caught up in this reality right now. We got to remove ourselves. And nature is one thing for sure that will put you into that place.
Mm-hmm.
Should we go back to 2020? What the heck was that about?
Yeah. So, 2020 was the year that needed to happen. And this is not the popular belief or the popular opinion, but I am so firm on this, that 2020 woke so many people up in so many different ways. But the number one way I believe that 2020 woke people up was removing them from the identities that they were attached to. Ego death, right, is what I term it as, is just kind of stripping away those layers of who we think we are rather than just understanding what we are, which is just energy, right? So in our lifetime, we just add all of these layers. I'm a lawyer, I'm a doctor, I'm a good person, I'm a father, I'm a mother, I'm a wife, I'm a whatever, pool guy, like whoever you are, there's these layers and attachment to identities that we pack on. It's kind of like packing on the weight. And now you're just lugging around all this baggage. And in every moment, you're trying to prove what that identity is to the rest of the world. And you're limiting yourself, right? So what 2020 did, we could talk about a lot of things in 2020, but what it essentially did for the individual is it took people away from their 9 to 5. It took people away from their identities. It took people away from, I'm the best parent ever because I have a nanny looking after my kids every day. Oh no, now I have to look after my own kids, and that's a huge, stark realization. So it just woke a lot of people up to what really matters, who are you really, and what about life have you been missing out on? And so at an individual level, it's been waking people up because it's essentially been forcibly removing people from their identity and this false sense of identity and this illusionary reality that they were living in. At a collective level, 2020 needed to happen, and it happened in a positive way at a collective level because it started to, and we kind of already knew that systems were starting to break down, but it really got the ball rolling on breaking down the systems that were not serving us. Now, I know that most people believe that these systems were absolutely serving us, and these are all good things that we really needed for safety and stability and what have you. But really, truly, it's a capitalist society, no matter what country you're living in, and it's always feeding that 1%. We need to break down the education, the economy, the political, the religious systems in order to come to a place of how can we all benefit from these systems rather than just benefiting that 1%. So I don't believe that it's all of a sudden going to clear up in 2021. I strongly believe that it is going to have to get worse before it gets better. I did download the information that we're on a 4-year cycle between 2020 and 2024. It's the absolute collapse of the society that we once knew. And it's going to be a rebirth of a brand new society after 2024. And it's going to take a while to even build up that new society. But I just want to say, and I'm sure you guys know this too, there are cures for cancer. There are free energy technologies out there. All of the solutions of all of the issues that we currently have are out there. All we have to do is implement them, but we can't implement them with still an old traditional system that is not serving the collective. So one more thing that I want to mention about everything is there are different agendas that are being played out at this time. And I am not aloof or ignorant to the agendas that are being played out. I have been watching both of these agendas for quite some time, right? And when I say both agendas, I'm talking about high vibrational agendas and low vibrational agendas. The light and the dark are being played out on this planet. Most people, when they start to wake up and question their reality, all they see is that dark new world order, corrupt agenda. And I kind of chuckle because I'm like, this agenda has been played out since the dawning of humanity. This is not a new thing. It's not all of a sudden starting to happen. This has been happening, so it's important to be aware of that and have that knowledge of that side, like I said, but it's also important not to get stuck in that and realize that at the end of the day, we are living in a binary reality, which means that there is another side, and the other side is this beautiful, incredible, pure light agenda that's also being played out, where we have so many interdimensional beings that are here to help us raise our consciousness and move through this very tumultuous time.
Yeah, that was really nicely said.
I want to go back a little bit to, you didn't talk about this directly, but around spirituality. Mm-hmm. So you said something about, a lot of times we kind of think like it's, all rainbows and butterflies and stuff, and that's not really it. And we were listening to something just the other day by Jacqueline Hobbs, who is oraclegirl.com. And I really like some of the work that she does. And one of her purification tracks talks specifically about how we often spiritualize things that are ugly or even abusive, that are not meant to be spiritualized. And it really, even now it gives me goosebumps when I think about it, because I feel like in a lot of ways, spirituality has even been hijacked as far as what we've termed as spirituality. And then it creates a lot of polarization and judgmentalism around stuff too. And I'm just wondering what your perspective is on that. What do you mean by spirituality? What is spirituality for you?
Mm-hmm. Honestly, spirituality is just thinking for yourself. It's free will. And one of the labels that I've really been toying with lately, because, labels are needed at a certain extent, and then, we can dip in and out of them without attachment. So one of the labels that I've been toying with is free will activist. That's what I feel like I am. That's what I stand for. At the end of the day, I'm not on one side or the other ever. I'm always just promoting, think for yourself, question everything. Even what I say isn't the absolute ultimate truth. Only you know what that truth is, because truth is subjective in this reality based on the limitations that we have. So spirituality to me is just free will, and utilizing that free will to make conscious choices from moment to moment. And that's it. We can't get caught up in the weeds. And I completely understand what you're talking about. And the other term for it is spiritual bypassing, right? Which is really important, and I also did a whole podcast the other day on, what was it? Being like socially correct, or, being like, there's a term for it, but it's like, we're getting into this place where what is socially acceptable, right? It's like, well, in order to be spiritual, you have to do yoga every day, and you have to meditate for 2 hours, and you have to be vegan. And it's like, why are we putting limitations on things that should have no limitations on it whatsoever? Like, let's not create another religion here, right? So I try and stay away from what is right and what is wrong, or telling people what is right and what is wrong, because only you know that for yourself. So it's really important that people wake up and continue to utilize their own free will, rather than getting stuck in any sort of dogma, belief, or attachment to another reality that's still limiting.
And that's a really important point for people listening, is that when you are listening to other people, and this is one of the things I appreciate about your message and the other people that we do listen to at different times, and even our message when we share our message out with people, everybody is not telling you to do anything or to listen to anything other than to come back to yourself. Mm-hmm. And I think whenever you start to listen to people that are trying to tell you what to feel and what to think with very much absolutes, you should have something inside you should kind of alarm a little bit, because it should really be coming back. And if anything, I've learned through my years and even working in naturopathic medicine and healthcare is that everybody is individual. And everybody's experience is completely individual. There's no one thing for anybody. So the only answers that you're going to come up with at any given time is what you need to reflect on within yourself. And so as much as you'll share your perspective on stuff, you never push it on people. It's just, here's what I'm seeing. See if that resonates. And if it doesn't, then move on to find something else that resonates. All of it's just awareness. It's just information.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Can you speak a little bit more about crystalline frequency? And you're speaking of the chakra system will no longer apply in the realm that we're moving to from 3D to 5D. Oh, maybe we should backtrack. Can you define what 5D is and what 5D is comparison to 4D compared to 3D, and then what it means for us to be moving more into a crystalline frequency?
Absolutely. Yeah. So third dimension, fourth dimension, fifth dimension, like I mentioned before, are just different densities of vibration. That's all they are. And as we move through those different densities of vibration, things become a little bit more fluid. So, in a more scientific way, 4D is actually time. The fourth dimension is time itself. So when we raise our vibration above the fourth dimension, we move into fifth dimension, time gets weird. Like, I don't know about you guys, but like things have been speeding up, things have been slowing down. It's been really weird lately, especially for 2020. I feel like 2020 was a non-existent year. Like, I don't know where it went. And there's even theories out there of like, did we enter into a different dimension for 2020? And then now we're back into our like normal timeline. It's interesting. So the easiest way that I can explain 3D, 4D, 5D is actually from water. So if you think about water being frozen and being solid and being an ice cube, that's the third dimension. Water is solid, it's dense, it's heavy, it's an ice cube, it's, you know, unmoving. That's the third dimension density. It's just so dense, so unmoving, so solid. And sometimes people feel safe in that, right? Moving into the fourth dimension frequency, that ice cube melts and all of a sudden you've got liquid water, right? And so the fourth dimension, still heavy, still dense in a certain, you know, way, but also flexible and moving and can really kind of fit between the crevices. And then 5D is, imagine that water actually evaporating. I know you've got water vapor and all of a sudden you're free and you're liberated and it feels good. And, you know, and what I'm talking about is really within your own perception, because we have a very abnormal thing that's happening on this planet. It's a shifting of frequencies. Typically, we have beings in the fourth dimension and beings in the fifth dimension and beings in the third dimension. It's very odd and very rare in the universe that a third dimension species will move to different densities in a lifetime, right? I mean, in 100 years, it's pretty wild. And that's what we have here. So our bodies, in a sense, are going to remain as dense as they are in the third dimension frequency. Our bodies are changing, though, in a way. Some people have a great awakening and they lose like 50 pounds of weight. You know, some people, their hair changes color. Like, you know, bodies do change within the vibrational frequency. Maybe you had cancer or a tumor and it heals itself because your density is getting lighter. So bodies do change, appetites change, even the food that you intake changes. Just listen to yourself. But really it's that perception that changes, right? Really you start experiencing and perceiving the world around you in a very different way as your vibration increases, and eventually your physical reality will align to that new 5D state of being. Okay. So then, you know, moving into crystalline frequency, another kind of image that I can give you, and this is the way that I understood it. Okay. If you imagine like a light, like a light, just like a light. Okay. And you separate that pure white light into different fractals. Those different fractals are colorful. You separate pure white light and you get a rainbow, right? And that's kind of what happens when we take light and water and whatever reflection. And so that's what the chakras are, right? The chakras are a separation of the oneness of just pure white light. So you've got the rainbows within your body. And once again, that's just the way that the light is filtering through our body, through our old 3D dense energy to create the chakra system. And within the chakra system, we need to compartmentalize and categorize in order to understand and process, right? In this new crystalline frequency, we're no longer holding anything. We no longer have the capacity to hold anything. And I just want to remind people that I don't do any external research. So everything that I know comes purely through experience, purely through channeling. And it was years ago, like maybe even 8 years ago, when I started channeling for clients, and my clients would ask about their children. And what was so odd was I would be taking a look at these children and I'm like, okay, I don't know what to tell you, but your child doesn't have a chakra system. And they're like, what? What's wrong with my child? And eventually, you know, I had to ask all the right questions, and I came across this thing called crystalline. Oh, your child's just crystalline, and apparently that's a good thing. And that's when I started to realize that these starseeds, these little old souls that are coming to this planet, they're not processing energy the same way that we are. And I also believe that it's possible, and this is what I'm seeing, we're moving from a 7 chakra system into a 13 chakra system, which means that we're opening up our hand chakras, we're opening up our ear chakras, and we're opening up 2 extra chakras above our crown chakra to have more senses, talk about extrasensory, right? The ability to heal, the ability for clairaudience, and the ability to channel, right? Is this 13 chakra system. So once again, it's just, we're still processing energy and categorizing and figuring it out, but we've got extra ability to process in that way. And then crystalline is, there's no processing. It just is what it is in the moment. And then in the next moment, it isn't what it is because it just, that moment passed. So that's really moving into this 5D state of being, which is, I call it a quantum simultaneous state of being. It's everything all at once, past, present, and future simultaneous. Your old physical self and your new physical self simultaneous. One of the techniques that I've been working on within quantum physics and quantum exploration is called quantum convergence theory, which is something that I downloaded. And it just basically means that we can converge all timelines, or at least a couple of timelines together, so that we're surpassing and actually folding time in and of itself, and also surpassing space in that way as well. I know it sounds like crazy and I'm like a mad scientist, but I believe that the laws of physics are not going to be the same even in 10 years from now. And things like glitches in the matrix and the Mandela effect are only going to ramp up in this new state of being because everything is simultaneous. And say, for example, just one kind of example of this is if you had your father, okay, and your father's like, I don't know, 79 years old, and he's having issues with his knees and there's things going on or what have you. I believe that what we can do is we can take your father, okay, and being removed from him, and say, for example, you have a picture of him at 42, okay? I believe that we can actually bring him back in a physical, biological, cellular way to the state of being that he was at 42. Maybe his wrinkles don't go away, or his, things will go away, but inside, all of a sudden his pain is alleviated. All of a sudden, maybe a tumor that he has is shrunken, because we can quantumly loop different timelines together. So the implications of this quantum world and this state of being where space and time is simultaneous are vast. We can apply this in so many different ways, and I believe even reverse aging, which is pretty wild and it's a big claim to make, but this is what is possible in this new state of being, where we don't have to separate, compartmentalize, and go through life in a linear way.
It's super exciting, Elizabeth. We're talking to Dr. Todd Ovokatis tomorrow, who's created something called pineal tones, and he's a researcher, really, really brilliant guy. But in his book, he actually talks about that he believes we can actually live to be about 1,000 years old. And he talks about this combination of kind of what is changing within the body, what we're able to do, and also because of what he's predicting is going to continually shift, like each decade, or what we're at right now, 30 years from now, what we're capable of doing and what changes is going to give us this much more expansion. And if we can make it there, then there's going to be this much more. So there's this idea that, yeah, there's a lot of potential there. And then it's just dialing that in. I mean, it's really exciting. So I'm excited to chat with him about that tomorrow. And when you were talking about density, I mean, you see this even in what's going on, like when we're moving from, 3D is more of like this density you were talking about, even in the way we talk about things, like, from a medical kind of side, it's like everything was so biochemistry for so long. And now it's like the words we're using are more intention and frequency and vibration and light. And it's like this, now we're realizing. And so it's moving from sort of concrete to more abstract. And we're seeing that in many different areas. So it's like, I completely hear where you're saying with that. As we're transitioning, you can see that transition of density shifting in how we talk about things. Now, I want to be cognizant of your time because I know we are just about done here. One last thing I would like to ask you, because and I implore everybody, go and check out your video that you did on, we'll have to get the link for it and I'll put it in the show notes, but the one you did on sex, because really, really important. And I want to just bring some light to this, because I also feel like this is an issue so many people have troubles with and struggle. And it has been shown, I mean, stuff I've researched before, it's like, you've heard this many times, like sex and orgasm are incredibly powerful tools for, I mean, they might have been termed like spiritual awakening before, or to
sort of light our bodies up in different ways. But you did a really amazing talk on that. And I know you did an entire like hour and somewhat about it, but maybe just bring some awareness before we finish up around that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So when you have a spiritual experience or you have some sort of awakening, it's this place that you're in where it's pure connection to source. And I've had many moments in this lifetime where I'm just, I mean, all of a sudden I'm crying and I'm laughing and there's snot coming out of my nose. And it's like, it's just the most, I call it cosmic euphoria. It is the most euphoric feeling where nothing else in this world exists. And I know some people get there through psychedelics or through meditation or what have you. I believe we can get there at random. You could be driving and you could just listen to a song and it spawns this melting of your illusionary reality. Now, another way to get there, and this is so important, is through sex and orgasm. And orgasm is a place where you have to let go of every aspect of, it's even funny, like letting go of your physical body, any qualms that you have, any limitations, any, attachments that you have, and especially letting go of your mind, right? You can't get there to this place of orgasm if you have any sort of attachment to anything in that moment. All of a sudden, space and time don't exist in that moment. Orgasm is simply just opening up your crown chakra, raising your vibration from your base root chakra all the way through your body and connecting that energy to source in that moment. And of course there's different levels and stages, but I'm talking about that ultimate orgasm, that ultimate connection. And, the ancient Egyptians, they really knew how to work with this. And it was funny because we were just talking about reverse aging and living a long time. I believe that things like orgasm is what the Egyptian mystery schools used to use to live 600 years. I don't know why archaeologists think that that's just like they must have not done their math right. It's like, no, they actually lived that long. And yeah, they had some interdimensional DNA and stuff, but they were using these sort of techniques to kind of get there. And one of the techniques with sex and orgasm is something called Tantra and Onking. Tantra is just a breathing technique that you could do alone, and you can raise your vibration up and connect it to source. And once you have that Tantra experience, or that orgasm experience, even within yourself, I call it an internal orgasm because you don't even need any external stimulation to get there. You can actually reverberate that orgasm, that energy, once you connect to source, and you can reverberate it through your body. So if you wanted to, you could have a 5-minute, 10-minute, potentially 20-minute long orgasm, which is really just accelerating the cellular, aspect of your physical biological body. So orgasm and sex is so important, and we need to do it in a way where we let go of fear and guilt and shame. And, I've really been unpacking this concept, even though it's not really, something that I talk about often, but so many of us have so many layers and limitations and fears and, guilt and shame around maybe religion and around maybe past lifetimes. And we pull that into this lifetime, and it removes us from being able to have a free and liberating orgasm, and have that experience during sex, and be able to connect with source in that way. So, it's really important that you spend that time with yourself and you scrape away any of that guilt, shame, fear that you're holding on to in relation to sex, or even just your physical body, because orgasm is such an important aspect of being human and connecting to source. And there are so many different interdimensional beings out there that don't have sex, that don't have the sexual organs to get them there. And they need different maybe tools or techniques or technology to do that. So I think that we all just need to get back to ourselves and get back to source and explore these concepts a little bit further. And I do deep dive into those things. And I also just recently did another sex video as well, that people can explore and figure out.
Oh, great. We'll get the link to those and we'll put them in the show notes as well for people. Yeah. And I think such an important part. And it's also, orgasm has been like sexualized into something that's almost making it very small part of something that is much, much bigger.
Yes.
And I think even sometimes I believe that's probably been on purpose in a lot of ways to kind of keep people out of their state of power that they can be in.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome. Elizabeth, I feel like we can talk to you for a few days. But are there any last thoughts or words that you want to share?
Yeah, I guess the last thing, especially right now at this time, you know, people are in a lot of fear, are in a lot of chaos and static. The number one thing is understand how powerful you are, right? You are the only one observing the reality around you. Therefore, you are the only one creating the reality around you. Step out of limitation, step out of fear, step out of victim, and start to take your power back in your own reality. And understand that, hey, if you created your reality and you're faced with a lot of challenge and a lot of low vibration and a lot of fear, then you can uncreate that and recreate something that is in a higher alignment to your highest vibration. So it's just really that power piece and understanding how powerful we all are as the creators of our own reality, and you know, the abilities that we have in recreating this reality and stepping into that truth.
Beautiful. Elizabeth, where can we send people to learn more about your work?
Yeah, so it's just Elizabeth April across all socials. And I've got also a course, an online school out there. And one of my courses that it took me about a year to develop, but 10 years of channeling, is called the Shift Masterclass, 3D to 5D. So if you feel like you're stuck in reaction and you're stuck in emotion and you're stuck in attachment and you don't know how to navigate yourself away from that, this course will literally hold your hand week by week and give you the appropriate amount of lessons that you need to move and shift from 3D to 5D. So I really recommend that. That's something to really, you know, think about. And then I guess the one thing that I'm really excited about is my book, my first book that I'm finally releasing in April. So people can get really pumped up about that.
Oh, very that's cool. Awesome. That'll be really fun.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll set something up down the road to talk specifically about the book.
Definitely.
Elizabeth, we think you're awesome. We love you so much and love the message you put out. So thank you so much for being a part of this series with us.
Oh, thank you guys so much.
Well, that was awesome. Thank you so much for taking the time to invest in your health and well-being. Since this podcast is brand new, reviews and subscribers are so vital for us to get off the ground and share this really important information. So if you found this information valuable, please post a review and subscribe to the podcast so you'll get our newest episodes. Also, if you know of someone who would benefit from this, please share it with them. You can also find us on Instagram at #InspireHealthPodcast. If you have a question that you'd like to be addressed, direct message me on Instagram or leave a comment on one of my posts. I would love to hear from you. And you can grab our show notes and free resources for each episode at inspirehealthpodcast.com. So be sure to go online and check it out.